All right, stay with me. We're going to talk about local maxima, algorithms, AI, and Taylor Swift. I'm going to make it all make sense, I promise. First things first, I think everybody knows that AI marketing is exploding. Something like 40% of the Instagram feed is AI now. It's growing really fast. Meta is investing heavily in AI tooling. Meta just published a 1 billion parameter artificial brain that's designed to measure your response to videos and simulate it so they can build more AI videos for you. And it's not just the tooling that's changing. It's also actual ads that we see coming out all the time that are controversial or AI generated. And it's not even just the ad space. It's also AI generated imagery as a whole is exploding, frankly, because the tools are getting cheaper and better. I'm going to go through just a couple of use cases to kind of freshen you up. None of this will be surprising. And then I'm going to explain how it all comes together. So first, the Sydney Sweeney case, right? This was a famous case where Sydney was a real person in an ad, but certain components of the ad were AI generated because it was cheaper. I believe the car driving away was AI generated toward the end of the ad. The point here is that the brand chose to lean into controversy, and they've admitted that, right? They chose to lean into a controversial stance with their particular angle on the jean ad, and they chose to lean into classic controversial jeans ads from the past. The Brooke Shields ads from the 1990s were deliberately evoked. We're not here. I am not going to break down marketing history for you. If you want to look up the Brooke Shields Calvin Klein ads, it's a very famous example of the controversy that jeans ads have historically done, which in and of themselves are interesting because jeans are ubiquitous. Everyone has jeans. And so having to market them means you sort of have to step into controversy to try and differentiate yourself in the space. And this is exactly what we're going to dig into more as we get into this idea of local maxima. The second thing I want you to keep in mind, now we're getting to Taylor Swift, is this idea of Taylor Swift deepfakes. Now, deepfakes are not new. They're certainly not limited to Taylor Swift. But because Taylor Swift is a famous woman celebrity, we get in a special case, a special prevalence of deepfakes, special visibility on deepfakes. Journalists tend to use Taylor Swift as a test case when they are investigating the safety of AI systems. And so that's why we get an immediate test of Grok's Imagine feature and an immediate sort of news headline around the world that Grok's Imagine feature will create adult images of Taylor Swift as deepfakes. You might wonder, now where is this going with ads? I'm sharing this part because we are fundamentally in a situation where the technology to create ads and the technology to create controversy, which is exactly what we got at with the Sydney Sweeney case, are converging and cheapening. In other words, part of why we're at a local maxima is that the technology to create this kind of product is cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. Digital ads that would have cost, $1 million a couple of years ago are a tenth of the price or less now, and they're going down farther. We are going to see more and more major brands jump on the AI-generated ads train. I am fully prepared for a double-digit share of the ads in the Super Bowl in 2026 being AI-generated, at least in part. So there's a third piece here that I want to get at before we start to dive into the relationship between all of these components. And the third piece is the idea of the uncanny valley. Essentially, you need to combine the controversy of Sydney Sweeney, the ease of production, and the parasocial nature of celebrity relationships, which enables the creation of deepfakes of Taylor Swift and other celebrities, with the notion that we can't tell the difference anymore. And this is something that's true even of Gen Z. It's not really an ageist thing. Gen Z, in study after study after study, professes to care about authenticity. But the reality is they also struggle in study after study to tell the difference between good AI-generated material and real material. And I will tell you, as a part of the test case here, I went to Midjourney to create images of Taylor Swift in concert. They were not inappropriate images. They were just like Taylor Swift in concert images. And if I had been shown those images, I would not be able to tell you if it was an artistic shot by a photographer from a real Taylor Swift concert or if it was made up. And I think that that's part of what's going on that makes it challenging here, is that we ourselves are unable to distinguish artificial tokens from real tokens in ad situations or other situations today. It's true in words too, but we're talking in marketing, and images are central to marketing. So we're going to stay focused on that for the day. So those are the three pieces I want to bring together. We have Sydney Sweeney, we have Taylor Swift, and we have this idea of the uncanny valley. Where does this take us? Fundamentally, I want to suggest to you that we are living in an evolved system that has unintentionally evolved to a local maxima. And I want to walk through the technical reasons for that. And then I want to walk through, because I'm Nate and I like practical solutions, some ways forward out of that local maxima. So first things first, what are the system dynamics that we're all living in for marketing? And this includes marketers. My job here is not to blame marketers. It's actually to talk about the system as a whole and how AI is accelerating it. AI systems are creating evolutionary pressure on human content creation. So artificial authenticity is going to outcompete genuine authenticity in algorithmic environments. In other words, AI is an accelerant on top of the social algorithms that we have built and optimized through social networks over the last 20 years. This includes at least 4 individual feedback loops that are all accelerating. One is sampling feedback loops. So controversial content tends to get more distribution and creates training data that biases towards more controversy. That's the Sydney Sweeney use case. Essentially, the feedback loop samples and gets an idea of what works well. Controversial content, it's well known, does better in the feed. And so it generates more controversial content to accelerate that, right? We have talked about this broadly as a society. We haven't necessarily talked about the idea that AI is an accelerant for this. AI accelerates the production of controversial content by making it easier and cheaper to produce. And that in turn reinforces that training data loop for the algorithms. The second one is feature feedback loops are a problem. So when a user engages with content, they create a feature in the algorithm. User engagement with manipulative content will teach the algorithms that manipulation equals quality. That one is also not new as a feedback loop, but again, AI is accelerating it because AI is essentially able to produce content that is more likely to be engaged with, is content that is more likely to be latched onto by humans. And humans can't tell the difference. This gets back to the idea of the uncanny valley. We can't tell. And so we click and we engage, and we're feeding both the content algorithm that feeds us stuff, and we're also teaching the marketers that AI works well. The third feedback loop is an individual feedback loop for us. Repeated exposure to optimized content changes our behavior and expectations. There's been a lot of studies around sort of what the Instagram feed has done to our self-image and our social relationships. I think we can also talk about this idea of parasocial relationships here. A lot of the Taylor Swift phenomenon that I discussed is this idea that Taylor Swift is not just a celebrity, but Taylor Swift is someone with whom I have a right to have a relationship, even if it's a made-up relationship in my head. So this gets back to the number that I gave you at the very beginning of this video, where we talked about character AI and other sort of AI companionships apps and the money that they're generating, $220 million some dollars per year, growing very fast. They're cultivating the idea of parasocial relationships, but they let you create the character, right? They let you create the character you're going to have an artificial relationship with. Whereas traditional parasocial relationships, it's your imagined relationship with a celebrity. In both cases, AI accelerates this individual feedback loop in your own head, where you are changing your behavior and expectations because of what you're engaging with. The fourth feedback loop is outcomes. Essentially, successful AI content that runs through these feedback loops becomes the baseline for normal content. And so, in a sense, it's not just that the AI content is changing the way we consume behavior and changing what is in our feeds, it is also changing how we make real video content. There's been a lot of work done on how Hollywood movie making has shifted over the last 25 years with CGI. In the same way, the way we make real content, whether it's movies or ads or what have you, marketing assets, is changing because of AI. I don't think we fully processed this, but we are going to see camera angles shift. We're going to see expectations for what you can do with special effects. We're going to see expectations for how you bring in people versus obviously not people versus people who are deepfakes, even if they're not real humans, but they look so much like humans we can't tell the difference. That we are reshaping the baseline of normal in our own movies and ads by what we interact with. So these 4 feedback loops, the idea that controversial content gets more distribution, the idea that user engagement with manipulative content teaches the algorithms that manipulation is quality, the idea that repeated exposure of ourselves to optimized content or AI optimized content changes our own behavior, and the idea that outcome shaping shapes our expectations of even non-AI movie making and non-AI ad making and non-AI marketing. All of these are feeding on each other and being accelerated by AI, and that is producing emergent behaviors that nobody is programmed for. I am not a big believer in the idea that there is a bunch of evil marketers somewhere who are all deciding to sort of poison America or poison the world with their ads. That is a popular misconception. I have been a marketer. I have worked with amazing marketing teams. That is just not how marketers actually work. Instead, I think it's more useful to think about emergent behaviors in a system that is, as I've said from the beginning of this video, locally optimized. It's a local maxima system. So in this case, what we have is emergent optimization designed effectively to adapt the human psychological condition to AI content. I'll say that one more time. You have AI systems that are optimizing for engagement, and they inadvertently are optimizing human psychology for engagement with AI content. That is the through line that ties together Sydney Sweeney and Taylor Swift and this idea of the Uncanny Valley, parasocial relationships. It's all around this core thesis. Fundamentally, our AI systems, because we're building them on top of optimized systems for engagement, they're essentially adapting our psychology to engage with AI content. This then creates a problem because we say, as marketers and as brands, that we value authenticity. The humans buying the product say they value authenticity. In between, disintermediating that is an AI marketing system that values artificiality. It values what's fake. What do we do about that? How do we optimize there? My suggestion to you is that the way through this is going to be for brands to emphasize what cannot be faked with AI. I think the music industry is a really interesting example of this. Let's look at Taylor Swift and her launch of her Orange album, right? The new album that's coming out, TS12, right? When Taylor Swift announced that on August 12th, she blurred out the image of the album in order to prevent any issues with sort of album faking, etc., from AI content generation. But it's not just a defensive play. She's also pre-selling physical media, and she's not the first musician to do this. Vinyl's making a huge comeback. She's pre-selling the vinyls for the album. You know what's interesting about vinyls? You can't fake vinyls. They're real. You can touch them. You can hold them. That is part of why they're making a comeback. My suspicion, my strong suspicion, is that one of the ways that good brands can cut through the noise at this point is by doubling down on physical experiences that humans cannot get any other way. You cannot have an AI that gives you a vinyl of the Taylor Swift album in the same way that Taylor mailing you the album on the correct date is going to get you. That is an irreplaceable human experience, to open the package and get the vinyl. Well, that's a way through. That's a way to keep authenticity that holds long-term customer value in a world where there are going to be so many brands demanding your attention. And that, by the way, is one of the reasons I don't think this local maxima will hold forever. If you're wondering, well, should I throw up my hands? Should I just despair? One, that's not what I do on this channel, so go somewhere else. And two, I don't think so. Because at the end of the day, AI intelligence and AI tooling is continuing to get cheaper, which means every brand is going to be able to make these, fantastic, weird videos all the time. We're going to get a tremendous amount of content flooding the zone that is all very high quality and all very AI. And it's going to be so much that people are not going to be able to consume it all. You're going to have a massive signal issue. People won't be able to find signal to noise. So what does a good brand do to stand out? What do good marketing teams do to stand out in the age of AI optimized and accelerated algorithmic relationships? Well, good brands double down on actually giving you authenticity that you can't get anywhere else. And that's why I go back to physical product, physical goods, physical experiences, pop-ups, events, things that people can be in the space on that you can't copy with AI. They can be very Instagrammable moments. You can have the sort of the Instagram wall with like the special logo or whatever it is. You can have fun with it. You can make it sort of hybrid and online at the same time, but you still, I think, are going to need to have that irreplaceable human touch. And that's why you have examples like whiskey distilleries and other things like going back to getting physically close to their customers, offering customer tours of the distillery, offering special tasting rooms, this, that, and the other thing. And that's a luxury good. You might think, well, if you're not in the luxury good space, how are you going to replicate that? I think that that is where physical store footprints are going. We know that the mall is not really a thing in the US anymore. We know that the controversy that Sydney Sweeney courted with the jeans ad was primarily designed to drive attention, drive traffic to the American Eagle site, which would then convert. If that's what happened, you want to be in a position where you can give people experiences that are in person that leave them feeling like they want to come back for another experience like that they can't get anywhere else. Because part of the problem with marketing for controversy is it buys you the pop in the stock price. It buys you the attention, and I'm not going to pretend it doesn't buy you dollars. I'm sure it bought them dollars, right? Let's not kid ourselves. Controversy works. But it doesn't necessarily translate well into long-term customer value. And if you want long-term customer value, which ultimately sustains free cash flows and sustains the valuation of the business, I think you have to figure out how to get people from AI spaces into online spaces. And by the way, this is not me saying that AI ads are bad or that AI ads won't exist or that we shouldn't have them. I think the reality is everyone's going to be able to make their own AI ads very, very quickly. We're just going to have them. Instead, I want to think about how AI ads can tie us into physical spaces that allow us to engage with our whole senses, right? Our smell, our sense of touch, all of the things that make us register real experiences, maybe that help us build community for the brand around with other humans who are consumers of the brand. That's going to be what builds those long-term customer relationships. So I think that like piece one is getting physical. I want to suggest to you another piece that I think will help. To me, one of the things that we are going to start to see as consumers start to demand authenticity as a differentiator is we're going to start to see some kind of certificate of human touch in some of these brands' offerings. I don't know exactly what that will look like. This is a little bit of a peek around the corner, but you can take a tour through how the beauty industry has handled authenticity and beauty over the last 20 years. And the way marketing in the beauty industry has shifted as a result. Similarly, I think we're going to see marketing that leans into authentically portrayed human experiences. Marketing that says, this is a real human, we didn't AIify their face. Marketing that says, this is a real car, look, a piece of it just fell off. We didn't pretend. You're going to get more and more of that as a way to signal to consumers in a sea of AI content that you are worth paying attention to. In a sense, there's going to be an anti-AI signal that is going to come up because AI content is going to become so cheap and easy to produce. I want to close with a question for AI tool builders. If you're building AI tools for marketers in the space, most of the time, you have been building for the idea, for the tool chain to produce these ads. You've been building for a cleaner, simpler pathway from idea to ad. That's fine. I think that pathway is fairly well trodden. I want to suggest there's a lot of untaken space with AI in helping marketers exercise good taste and judgment over what is the best long-term positioning for the brand, what is the best long-term positioning for a particular ad campaign that supports the brand. There has been precious little AI work put into the connection between content, branding, and long-term strategy. And frankly, LLMs are getting smart enough that they can at least be thought partners on this. And I don't see anybody thinking about what you do when AI can produce 1,000 ideas and you have to pick one. Who's doing that part? And so that's the challenge I want to leave you with. I think we can build our way out of, and we can market our way out of the local maxima we're in. We don't have to tolerate the experience that we're having now in our algorithms. We can build our way out. We don't have to tolerate a world where everybody can be deepfaked, not just celebrities, not just Taylor Swift. We can put guardrails in place. But the key to doing that is our willingness to think more deliberately about how we want AI to weave into our marketing. And that's the heart of this question. If we have a local maxima, we have to be more intentional with our AI usage and the way we cultivate long-term relationships with the brands. And that's up to us as consumers to demand. It's also up to marketers, and it's up to builders who equip marketers with tools to think more intentionally. And that is the heart of what I have to talk about today.